My family said I ruined their lives. I just left quietly. This morning, I found 18 missed calls. I, 32M, never thought silence could be so loud until I heard it echoing through my childhood home 3 months ago. The accusations still ring in my ears, each word carefully chosen to cut deeper than the last. My family had gathered for what I thought was a simple dinner, but it turned into a tribunal where I was the sole defendant. The whole mess started when my younger brother needed money for his startup. Again, this was the 4th time in 2 years, and each previous loan had vanished into thin air with nothing but excuses and promises to show for it. When he asked for $50,000 this time, I said no. Simple as that. But nothing in my family has ever been simple. My mother's face crumpled when I refused, and she told me I was being selfish and cruel. My father, who had been silent through most of the conversation, finally spoke up to say that I had always been the problem child, the one who couldn't see beyond his own needs. My sister chimed in, reminding everyone how I had supposedly ruined her wedding by not contributing enough to the expenses, conveniently forgetting that I had already paid for the entire reception venue. The words kept coming, each family member taking their turn to list my failures as a son, brother, and human being. They said I was greedy, that my success had made me forget where I came from, that I was destroying the family with my selfishness. My brother sat there quietly, letting everyone else fight his battle while he played the victim. I listened to it all without saying a word. 27 years of being the family's financial safety net, of bailing them out of every crisis, of putting their needs before my own, and this was my reward. When they finally ran out of steam, I stood up, grabbed my jacket, and walked out. No dramatic speech, no angry words, no slamming doors. I just left. That was 3 months ago. I haven't spoken to any of them since. The silence was actually peaceful at first. No more emergency calls about overdue bills, no more guilt trips about family obligations, no more being treated like a walking ATM. I threw myself into my work, took up hiking, started reading again. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. But this morning, everything changed. I woke up to 18 missed calls from various family members, all within the span of 2 hours. My phone had been on silent, and I had slept through the entire storm. The voicemails were frantic, desperate, completely different from the cold anger I had left behind. My sister's voice was shaking when she begged me to call back immediately. My mother was crying, something about an emergency and needing to talk. Even my father, who never showed emotion, sounded broken when he asked me to please come home. But it was my brother's message that made my blood run cold. He was sobbing, barely coherent, saying that everything was falling apart and that he was sorry, so sorry for everything. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my phone, trying to process what I was hearing. Part of me wanted to delete all the messages and go back to my peaceful silence. But another part, the part that had spent decades being the family's protector, couldn't ignore the genuine terror in their voices. I called my sister back first. She answered on the first ring, and her relief was palpable when she heard my voice. She told me that my brother's startup had collapsed spectacularly, but that wasn't the worst part. Apparently, he had been using the family home as collateral for loans I knew nothing about. Multiple loans. The house was going into foreclosure, and they had less than 2 weeks to come up with nearly $200,000. My parents had no idea until the foreclosure notice arrived yesterday. My father had suffered what the doctors called a minor heart episode from the shock, and my mother hadn't stopped crying since. My sister was trying to hold everything together, but she was drowning in her own debt from a recent divorce. The irony wasn't lost on me. The family that had called me selfish and greedy was now facing the consequences of actual selfishness and greed. My brother had risked everything that belonged to all of us for his dreams, and now everyone was paying the price. I told my sister I would think about it, and hung up. But I already knew what I was going to do. Not because I forgave them, and not because I wanted to be part of their lives again. I was going to help them because losing the family home would destroy my parents, and despite everything, I couldn't live with that on my conscience. The next few hours were a blur of phone calls to lawyers, banks, and financial advisors. I had the money to save the house, but I wasn't going to just hand it over like I had so many times before. This time, there would be conditions, real consequences, legal protections. I drove to the family home that evening, my first time back since the dinner that changed everything. The house looked smaller somehow, shabbier. The garden my mother had always been so proud of was overgrown, and paint was peeling from the front door. It was like looking at a physical manifestation of how everything had fallen apart. My mother answered the door, and the sight of her nearly broke my resolve. She had aged years in just 3 months, her hair more gray than I remembered, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She reached for me like she wanted to hug me, then stopped herself, unsure if she had the right. The living room was full of papers, legal documents scattered across every surface. My father sat in his chair, looking frail and defeated. My sister was on the couch, laptop open, frantically trying to find solutions that didn't exist. My brother was nowhere to be seen. My father looked up when I entered, and I saw something I had never seen before in his eyes: shame. He told me he was sorry, that they had all been wrong, that they needed my help. The words came out stilted and uncomfortable, like he was speaking a foreign language. I told them I would pay off the loans and save the house, but there would be conditions. The house would be transferred into my name, and they could live there as long as they followed my rules. No more loans using the house as collateral. No more financial decisions without my approval. My brother would be banned from any involvement in family finances, and he would have to get a real job and start paying rent. My mother started crying again, but this time it was relief. My sister nodded eagerly, agreeing to everything. My father just sat there, processing the fact that his eldest son was now effectively the head of the family. But I wasn't done. I told them that their treatment of me 3 months ago had shown me exactly what they thought of me, and that while I was willing to help them, our relationship would never be the same. I wasn't their son or brother anymore. I was their landlord and financial guardian. They had made their choice when they decided to blame me for their problems instead of taking responsibility for their own actions. The room fell silent. I could see them all processing what this meant, understanding that their words had consequences they never anticipated. They had wanted me gone, and now they had their wish. I was helping them, but I was no longer truly part of their family. My brother finally appeared, looking like he hadn't slept in days. He tried to apologize, to explain how everything had spiraled out of control, how he had never meant for any of this to happen. I listened without interrupting, then told him that intentions didn't matter anymore. Only actions mattered, and his actions had nearly destroyed everyone he claimed to love. Over the next week, I handled all the legal paperwork, paid off the loans, and had the house transferred into my name. My family moved through the process like ghosts, grateful but subdued. They had gotten what they needed, but they had lost something else in the process. Update 1. It's been 2 months since I saved the house, and the new dynamic is still settling in. My parents treat me with a careful politeness that feels worse than their previous anger. My sister checks in regularly, but our conversations are stilted and formal. My brother got a job at a local warehouse and pays his rent on time, but he barely speaks to me when I visit. The house feels different now. It's still the same building where I grew up, but it's no longer home. I'm the owner, the authority figure, the one who holds all the power. It's exactly what I thought I wanted, but it feels hollow. I've been thinking about what my therapist said about revenge. She told me that getting what you want isn't always the same as getting what you need. I wanted my family to understand how they had treated me, to face consequences for their actions. I got that, but I also lost something I didn't realize I still valued: the possibility of genuine reconciliation. Update 2. Last week, my mother asked if we could have dinner together, just the two of us. She wanted to cook my favorite meal, like she used to when I was younger. I agreed, curious about what she wanted to say. The dinner was awkward at first, both of us dancing around the elephant in the room. Finally, she told me that she understood why I had done what I did, but that she missed her son. She said that having me back in their lives as a landlord was better than not having me at all, but that she hoped someday we could find our way back to being a real family. I told her that I missed being her son too, but that I couldn't forget how easily they had all turned on me when it was convenient. Trust, once broken, doesn't just magically repair itself. She nodded, tears in her eyes, and said she understood. We finished dinner in relative peace, and for a moment, it almost felt like old times. But then I had to leave, had to go back to my apartment, back to my life as the outsider who holds all the cards. The irony is bitter. I have more control over my family now than I ever did before, but I've never felt more disconnected from them. Update 3. Yesterday, my brother asked to speak with me privately. He told me he had been accepted into a community college program for business management, that he wanted to learn how to handle money properly so he could eventually earn back my trust. He also said he had been going to therapy to deal with his gambling addiction, something he had never admitted to having before. I was surprised by his honesty, but I told him that actions would speak louder than words. He nodded and said he understood, that he didn't expect forgiveness, but that he wanted to try to become someone worthy of it. It's been 6 months since that dinner that changed everything, and I'm still not sure if I won or lost. My family learned their lesson about taking me for granted, but the cost was higher than any of us anticipated. We're all still here, still connected, but the connections feel artificial now, maintained by necessity rather than love. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had just forgiven them that night, if I had chosen reconciliation over revenge. But then I remember how it felt to be blamed for their problems, to be treated like I was the villain in their story. Some lines, once crossed, change everything forever. The 18 missed calls that started this whole chapter weren't really about an emergency. They were about consequences finally catching up with people who thought they could treat others badly without any real repercussions. I gave them what they needed to survive, but I couldn't give them what they wanted, a return to the way things were before. Maybe that's enough. Maybe some relationships are meant to be rebuilt from the ground up, with new rules and new understanding. Or maybe some things, once broken, are meant to stay that way, serving as reminders of what happens when we take the people we love for granted. I still don't know which one this is, but I'm learning to live with the uncertainty. The silence isn't as peaceful as it used to be, but it's honest. And sometimes, honesty is the only foundation strong enough to build something real on, even if what you're building looks nothing like what you had before.